So we've been doing this series of lessons about Jesus and his connection to the minor prophets. We're in Habakkuk today. And Habakkuk in the book moves from confusion into assurance and then into worship. And it's a real interesting type of journey that Habakkuk takes. And the first question you really look at with Habakkuk is you just ask the question, why? This is what Habakkuk writes. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out wrongdoing, and you do not save. Why do you make me see sin and cause me to look on wickedness? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises. The law is ignored and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted, means it comes out twisted. And we see the same world that Habakkuk looks at. Turn on the TV and you see war. See one nation fighting against another nation. See families run for cover with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Children growing up with the sound of bombs instead of lullabies. And we ask, God, why do you allow that to happen? Or we hear about another mass shooting. We turn on the news and there are parents waiting outside of school for some type of news, desperate for any kind of word. A grocery store or a place of worship becomes a place of death. And we whisper, God, why do you let that happen? Or we sit at a hospital bed or a doctor's office with someone that we love and we hear some medical news that we don't want to hear. And then we wonder why it looks like a body that's once full of life is now decaying and dying. And we ask, why? We look at the world like Habakkuk looks at the world. And we see our systems of justice that, like Habakkuk, we say the law is twisted and perverted, and it's actually the word that Habakkuk uses there. He says the law has grown cold, and now it's twisted and perverted because the guilty walk free while the righteous suffer. Leaders enrich themselves and they oppress the poor. And we look at the systems in the world and we say, God, why don't you do something? Why don't you do something? And the world that Habakkuk is looking at is not any different than the world that we look at. And if we're honest with ourselves, many times we ask the very same questions. Habakkuk is looking at violence in the streets. He's looking at injustice in the courts. He says the wicked are surrounding the righteous, and he's asking, how long, God, will you let this happen? Now, what would be great is if Habakkuk tied that all up in this neat little theological package and this neat little explanation, and he just said, well, let me explain it to you. But that's not what God does. And so when you look at Habakkuk, the why evil seems to win, why does God stay silent when you need him the most, that little cry, that's what the book is about. But honestly, much like other times that God answers, God doesn't always answer the way that we want God to answer. And God answers Habakkuk with this incredibly shocking response. So Habakkuk says, God, I see all of the wickedness in Judah, and what I want is I want you to bring justice. I want you to step in and fix everything. And God gives a message back to Habakkuk, and he says, Habakkuk, let me tell you something. I am going to do something that even if I were to tell you, you wouldn't believe it. You would not believe what I'm going to do. And this is what God says. Look out at the nations. You see that nation called the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, depending on which translation you're reading. They're both the same. He said, man, they're wicked and they're vile. They laugh at cities that are fortified. They laugh at the other rulers in the world. They come and they are vicious and evil and destructive when they rise on the scene. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to raise them up, and they're going to come over and punish the people that you're talking about who are so very wicked. So I'm going to fix it, Habakkuk, but the way that I'm going to fix it is I'm going to fix it by bringing a people who are more wicked than the people that you are complaining about to punish the people that you're complaining about. And Habakkuk does exactly what we would do. He's like, what? What? You're going to do what? God, aren't you righteous? Don't you not look at evil? How in the world are you going to act like that? I mean, it's the answer that Habakkuk is not expecting. I mean, he's just kind of reeling. When I was thinking about this, I thought about that scene from the movie A Few Good Men. Y'all remember that scene? Where, you know, they're in that courtroom scene and they're bantering with each other. And he said, I want the truth. And you remember what Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth, right? That's what this is about. Habakkuk says, I want the truth. And God said, Habakkuk, you can't handle the truth. You cannot handle what I'm going to do in this world. And so now Habakkuk is so confused. He's like, what am I going to do with that? And he's trying to figure it out. He says, God, but you're righteous. The righteous is not going to use the wicked. If you're righteous, you're not going to do this particular thing. And man, this parallel becomes clear when you start getting to the teaching of Jesus. Because Jesus has got the same tension in his world. Remember that cool little parable about the weeds and the wheat? So there was this guy, and he had a field, and he went out, and he sowed all of the wheat in his field. He sowed good seed so he'd get a good crop. And man, he's got it out there. And then his enemy comes in the night, and the enemy sows the weeds, the tares in with the wheat, and they start to grow up together. And at the very beginning, it's really hard to tell the difference between the two. And then they start to mature, and his servants look out and say, oh man, look, you got all of these weeds in the field with your wheat. You want us to go pull all of the weeds out. That sounds pretty logical, doesn't it? I'm not much of a farmer, but it sounds logical. If you got weeds in your field, you go pull the weeds out. And that's what they thought. Do you remember what Jesus says in the parable? You don't do that. What happens if you go pull all the weeds out? Y'all can talk, it's okay. Do you remember? You're going to damage the wheat. Do you realize that when Jesus tells that parable, they're dealing with the same thing that Habakkuk is dealing with in the book of Habakkuk? God, what are you going to do with all of the evil that's in the world? Are you just going to stamp it out right now? I want you to come fix it. And God says, no, we're not going to fix it that way. That's not the way that we're going to do it. Even Jesus, when he's on trial, remember he's on trial before Pilate. And he says, Pilate, you would have no power if it weren't given to you. He's saying the same thing to Pilate that God said to the Babylonians. You wouldn't have any power at all unless I gave it to you, but it's borrowed power. It's only power for a certain amount of time. It's only power that's within this little select period of time that God allows it to happen. So we kind of get to this with Habakkuk. Sometimes God's answers are harder than his silence. And sometimes his methods offend us before his justice amazes us. But faith means anchoring ourselves in what we know is true about him, even when the truth unsettles us. So even when the truth unsettles us, we look at God and we say, okay, God, we know you're righteous and we know that you're holy, But man, we just still don't understand exactly what's going on. You ever ask a question that after asking the question you thought it would be better if you hadn't gotten an answer? Now, husbands are looking like, yeah, buddy. We know exactly what that looks like, right? So you get to chapter 2. In the back it says, this is what I'll do. I'll sit and I'll wait. I'll see what happens. I'll sit and I'll look and say, what's going to happen when I'm questioned and I don't know how to answer? And this is where, in the New Testament, we keep finding that phrase, the righteous shall live by faith. The righteous shall live by faith. Paul uses it. Peter, it just keeps showing up over and over in the New Testament. They quote this Old Testament verse, the righteous shall live by faith. I know you know the answer to this now because we're in the book of Habakkuk. You know where that comes from? The book of Habakkuk. Because Habakkuk says, okay, God, I don't understand. And God says, Habakkuk, I know you don't understand. It's only 3 little chapters, right? But this is what you know. The righteous shall live by faith. And what he means by that is the righteous live with the assurance and the faith that however God is going to work in the world, that's the way, it's the right way to work in the world. And God says, look, I want you to write this down, Habakkuk, and I want you to make it known to everybody. It's kind of like the heart of the book. The proud live by power. People who believe in God live by faith. So he does this for Habakkuk. He said, look, here's I'm going to raise up the Babylonians. Now, here's what's wrong with them. And he gives 5 woes against the Babylonians. He said, look, this is the way you behave, and this is what's wrong, and this is what I'm going to do about it. So God, even in raising the Babylonians up, says, hey, something is going to happen that I'll use them, but their power is not their power. They're not a great nation because they have great power in of themselves. It's because I'm raising them up for a purpose. So Johnny said the invitation song was going to be, the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before him. And so at the end of Habakkuk chapter 2, when Habakkuk is reeling and he's trying to figure this thing out with God and how God is using the Babylonians and how God is going to fix the injustice in the world, where he finally gets to is simply that verse. The Lord is in his holy temple. The Babylonians aren't Lord. The Babylonians are going to come do what God says that they're going to do, and then they're not going to be anymore. The people who are in Judah, who are creating all of the injustice and the wickedness that Habakkuk is living in, they're not Lord. The Lord is in his holy temple, and the only thing the earth can do is keep silence before him, because God is always going to work in the world in a way that brings glory to his name. So Jesus comes along and makes a statement very similar. John chapter 16, verse 33, he says, I have overcome the world. So we click on the news, except we don't click on news anymore, do we? I used to use that terminology for old people like me, because y'all remember when you had to actually go over, I don't know if y'all remember this or not. This will be interesting. Do you remember when you actually had to get up and walk across the room to turn the TV on? Like before remote controls? Like Dad had a remote control. We had a TV in Hornbeak, and we had an antenna outside. And we could get 3 stations if you turned the antenna the right direction. I want to show you how Dad's remote control worked. Son, turn on the TV. We want to watch channel 6. Son, go outside, turn the antenna. So you'd go out and you'd turn the antenna a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit. Oh, too much. Go back. Well, that's too much. Go the other way. Oh, wait. Yeah, that's good right there. Now, we got really fancy at some point. I think it's while I was in college. After I left, y'all check this out. After I left, he got this little thing. It had a motor on it, so he could turn the little knob to channel 6, and it would move the antenna to where he wanted it. I guess that's because I wasn't there to turn it anymore. I have no idea what I was talking about. I'm just kidding. Jesus comes along and says, I've overcome the world. All the things that look like they have all the power, all the things that look like are ruling this world, they're not the things. The things that you're watching on the news, that's not the power. When you turn on your computer and you browse the internet and you check the news for a minute, all the things that looks like are going on in the world, it looks like justice is being perverted and it looks like the wicked are going to win. That's not what is going to happen. Because the Lord is in his holy temple and Jesus says, I have overcome the world. Because this is us. We want answers now. We want justice now. We want the weeds pulled out of the field, but God says, wait, the vision is certain, the end is sure, the righteous, we don't live by explanations, but by trust, not seeing everything, but believing that the Lord is on his throne. The Lord is in his holy temple, and the earth keeps silence before him. So when you get to Habakkuk chapter 3, Habakkuk chapter 3 is about worship. It's about Habakkuk stepping back from his question and stepping back from God's shocking response, from stepping back against him trying to figure in his second question, how in the world is a righteous God, a holy God, using unrighteous people, to God saying the righteous live by faith. Let me tell you who I am. In chapter 3 of Habakkuk is Habakkuk stepping back and saying, there is only one thing left. I worship my God. I worship my God for who he is. Even when I don't understand, even though I don't understand how he works in the world, even though I don't know why he doesn't give me a yes answer to every prayer, even though I don't understand why he doesn't step in at places where I think he needs to step in, I know that God is wise and true and faithful, and I can't understand everything that there is about God. So what is left for me is to worship God. So he says things like this. Shocking to us. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, and the flock be cut off from the fold, and there's no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. What kind of picture is he painting? Man, when everything looks bleak and desperate, when it looks like I don't have a thing, I'm going to rejoice and trust in God. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. So Jesus comes along. And he's in the garden. And he says, God, if there's any way, let the cup pass. If there's any way I can avoid what I am getting ready to endure, I ask you for another way. And in that prayer, Jesus simply utters the greatest prayer of faith that our lips can ever utter. Not my will, but yours be done. And I think if we're honest with ourselves in our lives, we go through this same journey that Habakkuk went through in his book multiple times in our life. First, we have complaint. God, why don't you? Then we have conviction. The Lord is in his holy temple. So if God is in his holy temple and he's ruling even in the middle of my complaint, even I love Habakkuk when he says, I decided to sit down and see what I needed to answer the next time God asked me a question and I didn't have anything to complain with. That's what I feel like sometimes. Habakkuk moves from those two into confession and worship. I will worship my God. So what do we choose to do? We choose to get stuck in the complaint section, where sometimes I see people and they get stuck with a complaint. They never can get past the God, why don't you do? Maybe we get placed in the conviction section, where he says the righteous will live by faith. Or maybe we move into the confession section, which I will rejoice in the Lord. Faith doesn't mean that we never tremble. It just means that when we tremble toward God. Faith doesn't remove the Babylons and the Nebuchadnezzars and the evil from history. It reminds us that Jesus is the Rock of Ages and he will never move. So what do you choose to do? Do you choose to arrive at the point of understanding the Lord is in his holy temple, and what is left for you? What's left for me? What's left for the church? And hopefully what's left for the world is just simply to worship him. If you need to respond in some way, we're going to ask you to do that while we stand and sing.